Dr. Zethkon pressed his three-fingered hand against the cool metal wall of the research ship as another explosion shook the vessel. Through the viewing port, he could see the burning remains of two Althari defense ships, drifting in the black void of space. The Vorthak Empire had come again, and this time they brought more ships than ever before. The research vessel, Serenity's Hope, was not built for war. It was a science ship designed to study distant stars and search for new forms of life. But now it hid behind the shattered moon of Althos Prime, trying to stay invisible while the Vorthak fleet destroyed everything the Althari had built over the last 1,000 years. Zethkon's people were peaceful. They had never wanted to fight anyone. For centuries, the Althari had traveled between stars, trading knowledge and making friends with other species. They built beautiful cities that floated in space, created art that could make other beings weep with joy, and discovered medicines that could heal almost any disease, but they had never learned how to kill. The Vorthak were different. They were a species that thought like one giant mind. Every Vorthak soldier shared thoughts with every other soldier. They moved together like parts of the same machine. And their only goal was to take over everything they could find. They had already destroyed 17 other species. The Althari were next. Captain Morthek's voice came over the ship's communication system. His words were calm, but Zethkon could hear the fear underneath. All crew members, we have received new orders from the High Council. We are to retreat to the outer system and wait for further instructions. Zethkon knew what that meant. The Althari government was giving up. They would try to negotiate with the Vorthak, maybe offer to become slaves instead of being wiped out completely. It was the same choice the Vorthak had given to all the other species they had conquered. But Zethkon was not ready to give up. He was a scientist, and scientists ask questions. 3 days ago, his deep space listening equipment had picked up something strange. It was a signal from a part of space where no one was supposed to live. The signal was weak and used very basic technology, but it contained something that made Zethkon's hearts race with excitement. Mathematics. Complex equations that proved someone intelligent had sent the message. Star charts that showed they knew where they were in the galaxy. And most importantly, the signal repeated every few hours, which meant whoever sent it was still alive and still trying to talk to someone. The species called themselves humans. Zethkon had never heard of them before. According to their signal, they lived on a planet called Earth in a system they called Sol. The star charts showed it was about 47 light-years away from Althari space. That was not very far in galactic terms. But it was strange that no one had ever made contact with these humans before. Zethkon made a decision that would change everything. He walked quickly to his laboratory and activated his personal communication array. This was against all Althari protocols. Scientists were not supposed to talk to unknown species without permission from the High Council. But the High Council was busy trying to surrender to the Vorthak. He started composing a message to the humans. It was difficult because he did not know their language very well. He had to use the basic mathematical concepts they had included in their original signal, and hope they would understand. "Greetings, humans of Earth," he began. "My name is Zethkon. I represent the Althari Confederation. We have received your signal and wish to establish communication." He paused, thinking about how to explain their situation. How do you tell a peaceful species that you need them to come fight a war? "We are in great danger," he continued. "An enemy called the Vorthak Empire is attacking our worlds. They have destroyed many other species. Our military forces are not strong enough to stop them. We need help. If you have weapons or soldiers, please consider coming to assist us. I'm sending you the location of our home system." Zethkon attached the star charts that would lead the humans to Althari space. Then he added all the information he had about the Vorthak, their ship designs, their weapons, their tactics, and their numbers. If the humans were going to help, they would need to know what they were facing. He sent the message and sat back in his chair. What had he done? He had just asked a completely unknown species to come fight in a war that was not theirs. For all he knew, these humans might be even worse than the Vorthak. They might come to Althari space and decide to conquer it for themselves. But Zethkon did not think so. There was something about the human signal that felt different from the cold mechanical communications of the Vorthak. The humans had included music in their transmission, strange, beautiful sounds that seemed to come from the heart. The Vorthak never made music. 2 hours later, Zeth Khan's equipment picked up a response. The message was short and written in perfect Althari language. Somehow, the humans had learned to speak his language from just one communication. Message received and understood, the response said. We are sorry to hear about your situation with the Vorthak Empire. A fleet is being prepared to assist you. Estimated arrival time is 72 hours. Please send detailed tactical information about enemy positions and capabilities. We will help you. Admiral Sarah Chen, United Nations Colonial Defense Force. Zeth Khan stared at the message for a long time. 72 hours? It had taken him 3 days just to send a message across that distance. How could they possibly travel 47 light-years in 3 days? And what was a colonial defense force? That sounded very military. He quickly sent all the tactical information he had about the Vorthak positions around Althari space. Then, he did something that probably broke even more protocols. He sent a message to the High Council telling them what he had done. The response from the government was immediate and angry. Council leader Vashati herself contacted him directly. Dr. Zethkan, what have you done? Her voice was sharp with panic. You have contacted an unknown military force and given them the location of our homeworld. You may have doomed us all. With respect, Council leader, Zethkan replied. We are already doomed. The Vorthak will destroy us whether these humans come or not. At least this way we have a chance. A chance? Vashati's voice rose higher. You have invited another military species into our space during a war. Even if they defeat the Vorthak, what makes you think they will leave peacefully afterward? Zethkan did not have a good answer for that question, but before he could respond, his long-range sensors detected something that made his blood freeze. The Vorthak main fleet was approaching Althari Prime. Over 200 ships, including the massive command vessel of the Vorthak Empress herself. Council leader, he said quietly, it may not matter what the humans intend to do. The Vorthak are bringing everything they have. Our world will be ashes in 6 hours unless something changes. The communication channel went silent. Zethkan knew that Vashati was probably trying to contact the Vorthak to negotiate a surrender. But he also knew it would not work. The Vorthak did not negotiate. They conquered. Zethkan sat in his laboratory and watched the approaching enemy fleet on his sensors. 200 ships against the 12 damaged Althari vessels still capable of fighting. It was not even a battle. It was an execution. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, help was coming. Zethkan did not know what these humans were capable of, but he had heard something in their message that gave him hope. They had not asked what they would get in return for helping. They had not demanded payment or territory. They had simply said, we will help you. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The Althari High Council had gathered in their emergency chamber deep inside the floating city of New Harmony. Through the massive transparent walls, they could see the Vorthak fleet spreading across space like a deadly infection. 200 enemy ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls blocking out the stars. Council leader Vashati stood at the center of the circular room, her blue skin pale with fear. Around her, the other council members whispered prayers to their ancestors and prepared for the end of their civilization. The Vorthak Empress has sent us her final demands, announced Communications Officer Relmus. His voice shook as he read from the datapad. Complete surrender in 1 hour, or they will begin destroying our cities. They want all our scientific knowledge, all our resources, and half our population to serve as slaves. The same terms they offered the Keth Mori, whispered Defense Coordinator Yuntel. We all know what happened to them. Everyone in the room knew the story. The Keth Mori had been brilliant engineers who built incredible machines. When they surrendered to the Vorthak, they thought they would be allowed to keep working on their inventions. Instead, the Vorthak had used their own technology to wipe out their memories and turn them into mindless workers. The Keth Mori still existed, but they were not truly alive anymore. Suddenly, alarms began ringing throughout the chamber. Sensor operator Nixara looked up from her console with confusion. Council leader, I am detecting new ships approaching the system. They are not Vorthak vessels. Reinforcements from the outer colonies? Asked Vashati hopefully. No, these signatures are completely unknown. The ships are... Nixara paused, checking her readings again. They are enormous. The largest one is reading as 12 kilometers long. The main display screen activated, showing a tactical view of the system. The Vorthak fleet appeared as red dots spread around Althari Prime. But now, blue dots were appearing at the edge of the system, moving incredibly fast toward the planet. How many ships? Vashati asked. 43 vessels of various sizes, Nixara reported. But Council Leader, their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The power output from some of these ships is greater than our entire defense fleet combined. Vashati felt a cold fear in her stomach. Dr. Zethkan's humans? Before anyone could answer, a new voice came over the communication system. It spoke in perfect Althari, with a clear, confident tone that somehow made the whole room feel safer. Althari High Council, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Nations Colonial Defense Force. We have arrived to assist you against the Vorthak Empire. Please maintain your current defensive positions while we assess the tactical situation. Vashati activated the communication system with shaking hands. Admiral Chen, this is Council Leader Vashati. We are grateful for your arrival, but you should know that you are facing overwhelming odds. The Vorthak have 200 ships, including their primary command vessel. There was a pause before Admiral Chen responded. Understood, Council Leader. We count 217 Vorthak vessels, including one Emperor-class dreadnought. We also detect their standard battle formation pattern 7. This is a fairly typical first contact scenario for us. The Althari Council members looked at each other in confusion. Typical? How could facing an empire with over 200 warships be typical for anyone? Admiral, Vashati said carefully, perhaps you do not understand the scale of this threat. The Vorthak Empire has destroyed 17 different species. Their technology is very advanced, and they fight as a unified mind. Thank you for the briefing, Council Leader, Admiral Chen replied. We have reviewed Dr. Zethkan's data package about Vorthak capabilities. Our tactical analysis is complete. The Vorthak Empress is now demanding our immediate withdrawal. Should we inform her of our intentions? Vashati was amazed by the humans' calm attitude. Either these humans were incredibly brave or they had no idea what they were facing. What do you plan to tell her? The truth, Admiral Chen said simply. On the main screen, the human fleet had reached the outer edge of Althari space. The largest ship, which the humans called UNS Retribution, was indeed massive. It looked like a floating city made of metal and weapons, but even more impressive were the smaller ships that surrounded it. They moved with a precision that reminded Vashati of the Vorthak formations, but somehow different. Where the Vorthak ships moved like parts of a machine, the human ships moved like a pack of hunting animals. The Vorthak Empress herself appeared, on the communication channel. Her image showed a tall, thin being with gray skin and completely black eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of millions of connected minds. Unknown vessels, you have entered a Vorthak military operation zone. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. This system belongs to the Vorthak Empire now. Admiral Chen's response was broadcast to everyone in the system, Althari, Vorthak, and human ships alike. Vorthak Empress, this is Admiral Sarah Chen, representing the United Nations Colonial Defense Force. We have received a request for assistance from the Althari Confederation, who are our friends and allies. We have traveled 47 light years to get here. We are not going anywhere until our new friends are safe. The simplicity of the statement hit Vashati like a physical blow. Friends and allies? The humans had known the Althari for less than 4 days, yet they spoke of them as if they had been partners for centuries. The Vorthak Empress was silent for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note of curiosity. You claim friendship with a species you have just met. This is not logical. What do you gain from interfering in our expansion? The knowledge that we helped someone who needed help, Admiral Chen replied. That is enough. You are either very brave or very foolish, the Empress said. We have conquered 17 species with the fleet you see before you. We have never been defeated. Withdraw now, and we will allow you to leave unharmed. Vashti held her breath. This was the moment of truth. Would these mysterious humans decide that helping the Althari was not worth fighting an entire empire? Admiral Chen's response came without hesitation. Empress, we appreciate your offer, but we must decline. The Althari are under the protection of the United Nations now. If you want to hurt them, you will have to go through us first. The communication channel went dead. On the tactical display, the Vorthak fleet began to change formation. They were preparing to attack. Admiral Chen, Vashti said urgently, you still have time to leave. We cannot ask you to sacrifice yourselves for us. Council leader, the Admiral replied, you did not ask us to sacrifice ourselves. You asked for help. There is a difference. On the display, the human ships were spreading out across space in what looked like a completely random pattern. Some ships moved toward the asteroid field near the system's edge. Others positioned themselves near the gas giant's moons. A few, small vessels that the humans called fighters were racing directly toward the massive Vorthak formation. Defense Coordinator Yuntel stared at the display in confusion. What kind of battle strategy is this? They are scattering their forces. Instead of concentrating them, the Vorthak will be able to defeat them one group at a time. But Dr. Zethkon, who had been quietly watching from the back of the chamber, stepped forward with excitement in his voice. No, look at the pattern more carefully. They are not scattered randomly. Each human ship is positioned to cover specific approach vectors. And those fighters are not attacking. They are gathering information. As if to prove his point, the human fighters suddenly turned away from the Vorthak fleet and raced back toward their own ships. They had gotten close enough to scan the enemy formation, then retreated before the Vorthak could respond. Impressive reconnaissance work, Dr. Zethkon murmured. They are learning everything they can about their enemy before committing to battle. Admiral Chen's voice returned to the communication channel. All Althari vessels, please withdraw to minimum safe distance. Combat operations will begin in 60 seconds. Vashti realized she was holding her breath again. 43 human ships against 217 Vorthak vessels. The mathematics were simple and terrible, but somehow, listening to Admiral Chen's calm, confident voice, Vashti found herself believing that maybe mathematics was not everything. Maybe these humans knew something about war that the rest of the galaxy had not learned yet. The Vorthak Empress had fought many battles, but she had never seen ships move like the humans did. Her fleet of 217 vessels moved in the perfect geometric formations that had brought victory against 17 different species. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be at any moment. It was the advantage of the shared mind, perfect coordination that no individual thinking species could match. But these humans were not trying to match Vorthak coordination. Instead, they were doing something that seemed impossible. Their ships moved independently, yet somehow they worked together better than species that could read each other's thoughts. Tactical analysis, the Empress commanded. Her lead strategist, a Vorthak commander whose mind was linked to 50 different sensor operators, responded immediately. The human vessels appear to be using unpredictable movement patterns. Their formation has no recognizable structure. Our targeting computers cannot predict their next positions. Impossible, the Empress replied. Every military formation follows logical patterns. Increase scanning intensity. Already at maximum, Empress. The humans are also using some kind of electromagnetic interference that is disrupting our sensor networks. And their ship designs. The strategist paused, confusion bleeding through the mental link. Their ships appear to be built specifically for maximum maneuverability rather than maximum protection. The Empress studied the tactical display with growing irritation. Human ships were spread across the entire star system like seeds scattered by the wind. Some hid behind asteroids. Others used the gravity of planets to change direction in ways that should have torn their hulls apart. A few small vessels were actually flying through the upper atmosphere of the gas giant, using its storms as cover. "Begin the attack," she ordered. "Standard formation advance. Concentrate fire on the largest human vessel." The Vorthak fleet moved forward as one unit, their massive ships forming a wall of armor and weapons that had broken the defenses of every world they had ever attacked. Energy beams and missile volleys reached out toward the human flagship, the enormous vessel called UN's Retribution. But the Retribution was not where the targeting computers expected it to be. At the last second, the massive ship had somehow shifted position just enough that most of the Vorthak weapons missed completely. The few hits that connected seemed to have no effect at all. "Impossible," the Empress whispered. "Nothing that large should be able to move that quickly." Her confusion turned to alarm as the human ships began their counterattack. But instead of fighting like any civilized military force, they attacked like a pack of wild animals. Small human fighters appeared from behind asteroids and unleashed weapons that tore through Vorthak armor like it was made of paper. Larger, human ships used tactics that violated every rule of space combat. One human vessel, a ship they called UN's Hornet's Nest, had positioned itself near an asteroid field. When a group of Vorthak cruisers moved to destroy it, the human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward the asteroids. The Vorthak followed, expecting an easy kill. Instead, they found themselves flying through a deadly maze of space rocks, while the human ship danced between them like it knew exactly where each asteroid would be. The human ship was not just hiding in the asteroid field, it was using the asteroids as weapons. Precisely timed explosions sent massive rocks flying into the path of Vorthak ships. The enemy vessels, designed for open space battles, could not maneuver quickly enough to avoid the impacts. "How are they predicting the asteroid movements?" the strategist asked desperately. But the Empress had no answer. According to their sensors, the human ships were calculating the gravitational effects of hundreds of asteroids in real time, adjusting their course constantly to stay safe while their enemies crashed into floating mountains of rock. The worst part was that the humans were talking to each other constantly. The Vorthak could intercept their communications, but instead of organized military reports, the channels were full of strange comments that made no sense. "Rodriguez, you magnificent crazy person, that was beautiful." "Chen, I'm seeing an opening at Vector 77 Mark IV. Can you get the Retribution?" "Over there?" "Copy that. All ships were about to try something stupid. Anyone who wants to file a complaint can do it after we win." The Empress realized with growing horror that these humans were not following any battle plan at all. They were making up their strategy as they fought, adapting to every situation, with terrifying creativity. When one tactic stopped working, they immediately tried something completely different. A group of human ships had somehow gotten behind the Vorthak formation and were attacking the engine sections of the larger vessels. But they were not using normal weapons. Instead, they were deploying some kind of devices that attached to the Vorthak ships and then began eating through the hull. "Empress!" The strategist's mental voice was filled with panic. "The human devices are some kind of self-replicating technology. They are reproducing themselves and spreading to other ships." "Impossible. No species would risk using replicating weapons in space combat." But the humans apparently did not care about the risks. The small devices, which the humans called nanobore charges, were spreading from ship to ship, creating holes in the Vorthak armor that weakened their defenses. And somehow, the humans had programmed them to only attack ships with Vorthak energy signatures. Even worse, the human fighters were doing something that should not have been possible. They were flying in formation with the Vorthak ships, matching their speed and direction perfectly, then suddenly accelerating away at angles that should have killed any pilot from the gravitational forces. "Empress," reported a squadron commander, "the human fighters are not being piloted by living beings. They appear to be controlled by artificial intelligence systems that can survive maneuvers no biological entity could endure." The Empress felt something she had not experienced in centuries of conquest: doubt. Her fleet was losing ships, and she did not understand how. The humans were using weapons and tactics that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics and logic. A new alarm sounded through the flagship. "Empress, we are detecting massive energy buildup from the human command ship." On the main display, the UNS Retribution was powering up some kind of weapon that was larger than most Vorthak vessels. Energy readings were climbing to levels that seemed impossible for any ship to generate. "All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship," the Empress commanded. "Destroy it before it can fire that weapon." But as the Vorthak fleet turned toward the Retribution, the other human ships moved to intercept. They spread out in a defensive formation that somehow managed to protect the flagship while still maintaining their own offensive attacks. It was like watching a single organism with dozens of different limbs, each one working independently but all serving the same purpose. The human weapon fired, but instead of a single massive energy beam, it released thousands of smaller projectiles that moved at incredible speed. Each projectile seemed to have its own guidance system, steering toward specific targets with deadly accuracy. The Empress watched in horror as 37 of her ships were destroyed in a single salvo. The human weapon had somehow targeted the exact weak points in each vessel, striking with surgical precision that should have required detailed knowledge of Vorthak ship design. "How did they know where to hit us?" the strategist asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the Vorthak ships was broadcasting a surrender signal, which was impossible because Vorthak ships did not have surrender protocols. But the signal was not coming from the ship's crew. It was coming from the ship's computer system. "Empress," the communications officer reported with disbelief, "the humans have somehow infiltrated our computer networks. They are learning our ship designs by accessing our own databases." The Empress realized with cold certainty that this battle was already over. In less than 1 hour, these humans had demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed anything the Vorthak Empire had ever encountered. They fought with the cunning of individual minds, the coordination of a hive species, and technology that seemed to be decades ahead of anything else in the galaxy. But more than that, they fought with a joy and creativity that was completely alien to the Vorthak way of thinking. These humans were not just winning the battle, they were enjoying it. "All ships," the Empress commanded, "withdraw to minimum safe distance. We need time to reassess this situation." For the first time in the history of the Vorthak Empire, their fleet was retreating from a battle they had started, and the humans were letting them go, which was somehow even more terrifying than if they had pursued and destroyed the fleeing ships. These humans were not just powerful, they were confident enough in their abilities to show mercy to a defeated enemy. That level of confidence could only come from one thing: the knowledge that they could win any battle they chose to fight. Dr. Zethkan floated in the observation bay of his research ship, watching the human fleet reorganize after their first victory against the Vorthak. What he had witnessed in the past few hours had changed everything he thought he knew about warfare, technology, and the nature of intelligent life in the galaxy. The humans had not just defeated a superior force, they had made it look easy. Their ships moved through space with a grace that defied physics, using tactics that seemed to come from the imagination of artists rather than military strategists. And now they were doing something even more remarkable. They were fixing everything. Human construction ships had appeared as if from nowhere, carrying supplies and equipment that the Althari desperately needed. The floating city of New Harmony, which had been damaged by Vorthak bombardment, was already being repaired by human engineering teams. Medical ships were treating wounded Althari with technology that healed injuries in minutes instead of days. But what impressed Zethkan most was not the human technology, it was their attitude. Every human he had spoken with treated the Althari not as strangers they had just met, but as old friends who needed help. There was no talk of payment or territorial claims or political agreements. The humans simply saw people in trouble and decided to fix the problem. Admiral Chen had requested a private meeting with the Althari High Council, and Zethkan had been invited as the person who made first contact. Now he sat in the council chamber, listening to a conversation that would determine the future of his entire species. "The Vorthak will return," Admiral Chen was explaining. "Our intelligence analysis indicates that what we faced today was only the advance fleet. The main Vorthak military force is much larger." Council leader Vashati leaned forward with concern. "How much larger?" "Approximately 1,500 ships," Chen replied calmly, "including their core battle fleet and the personal." guard of the Vorthak Empress. They appear to be gathering reinforcements from across their empire. The council chamber fell silent. 1,500 ships was more than the entire population of some Althari cities. It was a force that could destroy entire star systems. Admiral, Vashti said carefully, we cannot ask you to face such overwhelming odds on our behalf. Perhaps it would be better if we attempted to negotiate with the Vorthak. Admiral Chen shook her head. Council leader, with respect, the Vorthak do not negotiate. They conquer. Dr. Zethkan's data package included historical records of every species they have encountered. None were allowed to remain independent, regardless of what they offered in surrender. Then what do you suggest? Asked Defense Coordinator Yuntel. We fight, Chen said simply. And we win. Zethkan stared at the human admiral. She spoke as if facing 1,500 enemy ships was a minor inconvenience rather than certain death. Admiral, forgive me, but how is that possible? Even with your advanced technology, 43 ships cannot defeat 1,500. Admiral Chen smiled, and Zethkan realized that human facial expressions could be very reassuring. Dr. Zethkan, I think there has been a misunderstanding. The 43 ships you saw today were not our main fleet. They were our advanced reconnaissance force. Reconnaissance force, Vashti repeated weakly. The fleet you observed represents approximately 0.3% of the total military capacity of the United Nations Colonial Defense Force, Chen explained. When Dr. Zethkan sent his message requesting assistance, our military council decided that this situation required a more substantial response. She activated a holographic display that showed the space around Althari Prime. New contacts were appearing on the sensors, ships jumping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. But these were not 43 ships. The display showed hundreds of contacts, then thousands. How many? Whispered Communications Officer Relmus. 8,437 vessels, Admiral Chen replied, including 17 carrier groups, 43 planetary siege squadrons, and the flagship of the Colonial Defense Force, UNS Humanity's Will. Admiral Harrison sends his regards and wants you to know that the United Nations takes the defense of our allies very seriously. Zethkan felt his breathing become difficult. 8,000 ships? The human military was larger than most galactic empires. How was it possible that no one had ever heard of these people before? Admiral, he managed to ask, if your species has this level of military power, why have you never expanded beyond your own system? Why has no one in the galaxy encountered humans before now? Admiral Chen's expression became thoughtful. That is an excellent question, Dr. Zethkan. The answer is that we have been expanding, but very carefully. Human exploration fleets have been mapping this region of the galaxy for about 70 years. We have established colonies on over 200 worlds and made peaceful contact with 14 other species. 14 species? Vashti asked in amazement. We had no idea there were so many undiscovered civilizations. Most prefer to remain private, Chen explained. Humans respect the desire for privacy. We establish trade relationships and mutual defense agreements, but we do not interfere in the internal affairs of our friends. Until now, none of our allies had faced a threat that required military intervention. Zethkan was beginning to understand something that both excited and terrified him. You have been building a galactic alliance in secret. Not in secret, Chen corrected. Quietly, there is a difference. We believe that civilization should have the right to develop at their own pace, without interference from larger powers. The galaxy is full of aggressive empires that conquer everything they find. We wanted to offer an alternative. What kind of alternative? Asked Yuntel. Protection without conquest, Chen replied. Trade without exploitation. Friendship without domination. The United Nations operates on a simple principle. Every intelligent species has the right to exist and grow according to their own values, as long as they do not threaten others. The Admiral activated another display that showed a star map of the local region. Blue areas indicated human-protected space, green showed Allied territories, and red marked Vorthak Empire holdings. Zethkin was amazed to see that the human alliance controlled almost as much territory as the Vorthak Empire, but had done so without anyone noticing. The problem, Chen continued, is that the Vorthak Empire has been expanding toward our space for the past 50 years. Eventually, we were going to have to deal with them. Dr. Zethkin's message simply accelerated our timeline. You were already planning to fight the Vorthak? Vashati asked. We were planning to defend against them, Chen corrected. Human policy is defensive, not aggressive. We do not start wars, but we finish them. Zethkan felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in Admiral Chen's voice that suggested humanity had finished quite a few wars. Admiral, he asked quietly, exactly how long has your species been fighting wars? Chen paused, apparently calculating in her head. Continuously for approximately 12,000 years. Before we developed space travel, humans fought wars against other humans. Every military doctrine, every tactical innovation, every weapon system we possess has been tested against equally intelligent, equally creative human opponents. The council chamber was completely silent. 12,000 years of continuous warfare? Most species went through periods of conflict, but then they learned to live in peace with their own kind. Humans apparently had never stopped fighting long enough to forget how to do it. Does that mean, Yuntel asked carefully, that humans are naturally violent? It means we are naturally competitive, Chen replied. We compete in everything: sports, science, art, exploration, and yes, warfare. But we have learned to channel that competitiveness in positive directions. Most human, military conflicts these days are simulated war games rather than actual combat. We compete to see who can develop the best strategies and technologies for protecting what we care about. And what do you care about? Vashati asked. Admiral Chen's smile returned. Our friends, our families, our freedom, and the right of every species to have the same things we have. Zethkin realized that he was looking at the representative of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and also the most protective. Humans had spent 12,000 years learning how to fight, but they had also learned why fighting was sometimes necessary. The Vorthak Empress will bring her entire fleet, he said. They have never been defeated. Neither have we, Admiral, Chen replied. The difference is that we have been preparing for this fight a lot longer than they have. The Vorthak Empress stood in the command center of her flagship, surrounded by the greatest military minds her empire had ever produced. Through the massive viewing ports, she could see the largest fleet in Vorthak history, over 1,500 ships that represented the combined military might of 17 conquered worlds. She had brought everything: battle cruisers from the Keth Mori shipyards, fighters built with Zephyrian technology, weapons developed by the brilliant Nexari before their minds were wiped and their bodies enslaved. This was not just a fleet, it was the accumulated military knowledge of every species the Vorthak had ever defeated. But as her sensors showed her what waited in Althari space, the Empress felt something she had never experienced before: genuine fear. The humans had not brought 43 ships this time. They had brought thousands. And worse, they had done something that violated every rule of galactic warfare. They had fortified an entire star system in less than a week. Tactical report, she commanded. Her chief strategist, his mind linked to 50 different analysis teams, delivered information that should have been impossible. The humans have constructed defensive installations on every major asteroid, moon, and planet in the system. They have deployed weapons platforms that our computers cannot classify. And their fleet formations. He paused, confusion bleeding through the mental link. Empress, they appear to be using every type of starship design we have ever encountered, plus several that are completely unknown. The Empress studied the tactical display with growing disbelief. The human fleet included massive dreadnoughts larger than anything the Vorthak had ever built, tiny fighters that moved faster than missiles, and strange vessels that did not seem to follow any logical design principles. But most disturbing were the ships that looked exactly like vessels from conquered species. Are those Keth Mori cruisers? She asked. The energy signatures match, but they are operating under human command, the strategist replied. We are also detecting ships with Zephyrian, Nexari, and Althari design characteristics, but all of them have been modified with human technology. The Empress realized what she was seeing, and it filled her with cold rage. The humans have contacted the species we conquered. They have rebuilt their military forces. It was worse than that. According to the sensor data, the humans had not just rebuilt the fleets of conquered species, they had improved them. The Kethmori cruisers were faster and more heavily armed than they had been before the Vorthak conquest. The Zephyrian fighters moved with precision that the original designers had never achieved. And all of them were working together in ways that should have been impossible for species with different technologies and tactics. Open communication to the human fleet, the Empress commanded. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, calm and confident as always. But she was not alone. Standing beside her were representatives of every species the Vorthak had conquered over the past century. The Empress recognized some of them. Leaders who had surrendered their worlds to save their people, scientists who had been forced to serve the Empire, military commanders who had watched their fleets burn. Vorthak Empress, Admiral Chen said formally, I am required by the laws of the United Nations to offer you one opportunity to end this conflict peacefully. You will order the immediate withdrawal of all Vorthak forces from the territories of our allies. You will release all enslaved populations and return them to their homeworlds. You will provide reparations for the damage you have caused. And you will sign a treaty promising never again to attack peaceful civilizations. The Empress laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Humans, you face the entire might of the Vorthak Empire. We have conquered 17 species with this fleet. We will not be intimidated by aliens who have never faced real warfare. Admiral Chen's expression did not change. Empress, we have faced real warfare. We have been facing it for 12,000 years. The difference is that we learned from it. You learned from it? The Empress repeated mockingly. What could you possibly have learned that we have not? We learned that the strongest military force is not the one with the biggest ships or the most advanced weapons, Chen replied. It is the one that fights for something worth dying for. The Admiral gestured to the alien representative standing beside her. Every person in this fleet is fighting for their families, their freedom, and their right to exist. That makes them more dangerous than any weapon you possess. The Empress cut the communication channel and turned to her fleet commanders. Begin the attack. Show these humans what real military power looks like. The Vorthak fleet moved forward in the formations that had brought them victory after victory. But as they approached the human defensive positions, something went wrong. The enemy did not respond the way they were supposed to. Instead of meeting the Vorthak advance with their own ships, the humans activated weapons that had been hidden throughout the asteroid field. Massive energy beams reached out from rocks that had seemed completely harmless, tearing through Vorthak armor like paper. Missiles emerged from concealed launchers, each one guided by artificial intelligence that made them almost impossible to intercept. But the real shock came when the human fleet began to move. The ships did not advance in formation like civilized military forces. Instead, they scattered in all directions, each group using different tactics that seemed to come from different military traditions. The Kethmori cruisers attacked with the mathematical precision their species was famous for, but enhanced with human weapons that made them far more deadly than before. The Zephyrian fighters moved in swarms that covered the entire battlefield, their pilots working together with a coordination that surpassed even the Vorthak hive mind. And leading them all were the human ships, which fought with a creativity and adaptability that seemed to violate the basic laws of military strategy. Empress! The strategist's mental voice was filled with panic. The enemy is using our own tactics against us. They know exactly how our formations work. It was true. Somehow the humans had studied every battle the Vorthak had ever fought. They knew the Empire's standard attack patterns, defensive strategies, and communication protocols. But worse than that, they had figured out how to counter every single one. When Vorthak ships tried to form their unbreakable phalanx formation, human fighters appeared with weapons specifically designed to exploit the gaps between vessels. When the Empire's cruisers attempted their signature flanking maneuver, they found human ships already waiting in position to intercept them. The Empress watched in horror as her fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had conquered star systems were being destroyed by enemies they could not predict or understand. The Vorthak advantage of shared consciousness was becoming a liability as human cyber warfare specialists introduced viruses into their communication network. "Empress," reported a squadron commander, "our ships are receiving conflicting orders through the mind link. The humans have somehow infiltrated our command structure." The viruses were brilliant in their simplicity. Instead of trying to control Vorthak ships directly, they created false mental signals that made commanders think they were receiving orders from other parts of the fleet. Ships began attacking their own allies, formations collapsed into chaos, and the perfect unity of the hive mind became a source of devastating confusion. But even more terrifying was what happened when individual Vorthak ships tried to surrender. The humans did not destroy them. Instead, they disabled their weapons and escorted them to safe areas where medical teams provided aid to injured crew members. The humans were showing mercy to an enemy that had never shown mercy to anyone. "Why? Are they not killing us?" the Empress asked in confusion. Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channel, somehow reaching every ship in the Vorthak fleet simultaneously. "Because we are not you," she said simply. "We do not conquer. We do not enslave. We protect. And that includes protecting our enemies from unnecessary death." The battle was over, but the Empress could not accept it. With the last functional ships of her fleet, she launched a desperate attack directly at the human flagship. If she could kill Admiral Chen, perhaps she could still claim some kind of victory. The massive Vorthak dreadnought accelerated toward the UNS Humanity's Will, weapons charging for a final devastating strike. But as it approached, something impossible happened. The human flagship simply disappeared. For a moment, the Empress thought the ship had been destroyed. Then she realized the truth. The humans had technology that could make their ships invisible to all sensors. The Humanity's Will reappeared directly behind the Vorthak flagship, its weapons already locked onto the dreadnought's engines. "Vorthak Empress." Admiral Chen's voice was calm and patient, like a teacher explaining a lesson to a slow student. "Your ship is disabled. Your fleet is defeated. Your empire is finished. But you and your crew are alive, and you will remain alive as long as you do not force us to change that situation." The Empress stood in her ruined command center, surrounded by the wreckage of everything she had built. 1,500 ships reduced to scattered debris and surrendering survivors. An empire that had lasted for centuries destroyed in a single boo. "What do you want from us?" she whispered. "We want you to go home," Admiral Chen replied. "We want you to tell your people that the age of conquest is over. We want you to learn that there are better ways to live than by destroying others." "And if we refuse?" "Then we will teach you," Chen said simply. "But we would prefer that you choose to learn on your own." The Empress looked around at her defeated fleet and realized that she had no choice. The humans had demonstrated that they could destroy the Vorthak Empire anytime they wanted, but they had also shown that they preferred to save lives rather than take them. "We surrender," she said quietly. "Good," Admiral Chen replied. "Now we can begin to fix what has been broken." And across the galaxy, the word began to spread. There was a new power among the stars. Not an empire that conquered, but a federation that protected. Not a force that destroyed, but a people who built. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.